Before getting into this video, I'd just like to thank Surfshark once again for sponsoring it. Surfshark is a reliable VPN service that can provide privacy for all of your sensitive information, easily mask your relocation, and more. Surfshark's ability to change your virtual location has helped me to access content that I otherwise wouldn't be able to whilst making videos similar to this one. By unblocking blocked websites and bypassing geo-restrictions, Surfshark frees up your internet, meaning that you can access television, film, and other types of media regardless of where you are. And in addition, Surfshark is one of the few VPNs that offer one account that can be used on an unlimited number of devices. You can use my code, Alexander with an X, to get 83% off your purchase, as well as an extra 4 months for free. A link with access to all of this will be provided in the description below. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to give it a go and see if the service is for you. Thanks very much again to Surfshark, and on with the video. Montutu Youpi is introduced into the story of Hunter x Hunter in the most matter-of-fact of ways. While the lyrical Shiapoof is brought forth with an artistic and flamboyant flourish, and while Neferpito immediately establishes this menacing and overpowering threat, Youpi casually walks in almost as an afterthought. In the midst of this horrifying, grand, orchestral puppet show of sorts brought to life by the other two, we have the destruction of a wall, a crack of the neck, and the most base of declarations.
Harahetta.
And despite this juxtaposition, just as the introductions for the other two guards so expertly front-load the type of characters they initially are, the same could be said for Youpi. As our first impression indicates, Youpi does not have much of a personality to speak of at first. I think it's fair to say that he's pretty dim-witted and dull, with a one-track mind only focused on the basest of survival instincts and anything pertaining to his duty of protecting the king. And that continues. As the story moves on, his comrades slowly begin to show slight changes that would be precursors to the more robust manifestations of their mentalities during the palace invasion. But Youpi stays more or less the same. While Pito grows to care for Meruem the person, and Poof tries to maintain his ideal image of Meruem, Youpi's duty and outlook towards that duty don't really change. He does not despise Komugi for diverting Meruem, but neither does he actively try to protect her because of Meruem's true desire. He's essentially in between Pito's empathetic compassion and Poof's twisted idealism. He is an empty vessel with no leanings, bias, unnecessary thoughts, or lofty aspirations. There is no need for him to think about anything other than his job, and his job is simply to protect Meruem, to use his body to selflessly guard him from harm and prevent others from getting to him. And his natural powers are completely reflective and indicative of that, with his morphic abilities helping him to adapt and become whatever he needs to be to do what he must.
Ware wa tate, mi o motte, o mamoru.
He isn't literally empty, but you get my meaning. Youpi doesn't have as distinct of a connection to Meruem as either Pito or Poof, and I think a big reason why is because he himself is completely one-dimensional at first, a being whose programmed obligation is synonymous with who he is in every regard prior to his changes. When contrasted by more exuberant personalities, he's a great complementary royal guard, with his understated nature and pure focus being ideal in doing what needs to be done in any scenario. I don't mean to state that he didn't deeply care for Meruem, because the sorrowful howls of grief upon discovering his king's husk later on are haunting and painful enough to communicate how much he loved him and how much his entire existence hinged on him. But I mean that his unique and specific affinity to Meruem and the method through which he enacts his role is one less personal than the other two guards. An immovable, unbending fortress tasked with guarding the one he adores. But that was always going to change as soon as the stimulus for that change presented itself, and throughout his gigantic fight, he experienced all sorts of new things. Confusion? Well, okay, confusion wasn't really new for him. But there was also slight fear, exhilaration, and eventually a realization that he could not locate Meruem nor the other guards, which led to him confronting the fact that in that moment, his purpose was void. After all, if he was not a protector, then what was he? Why did he even exist? This complete lack of ego and desire and this one-minded identity were the perfect platform for growth and maturation, causing Youpi to reevaluate things and shift his thinking. So with nothing better to do, and aggravated beyond belief, he fights the hunters again in an attempt to at least keep them away from Meruem. However, he then consequently learns the beauty of harnessing his fury and finding serenity in the madness. He becomes lost, he grows frustrated, he rages, he realizes how to control that rage and achieves an epiphany, and overriding all of these new and powerful feelings is gratitude for the hunters for having pushed him to reach this maturity. And he expressed this gratitude by doing them the respect of finally recognizing the hunters as worthy of death. In this arc, in a situation where death is a very real and even likely prospect, what characters like Shoot and Knuckle want more than almost anything is a respect for their commitment to the cause, an acknowledgement of what they sacrificed and put into their fight. Sentiment overpowers logic for them multiple times in this sequence, and in the deepest reaches of their soul, one of the things that they want most is something like a warrior's honor in this fight. They are fully willing to die for this operation, and they accepted that possibility by choosing to be a part of it. But the one thing that they cannot stomach is their intent and effort not being respected. On the brink of death, Shoot felt demoralized and disgraced because Youpi didn't acknowledge his efforts and looked at him as if he was worthless trash without even bothering to finish him off. He felt dehumanized and invalidated, having given everything to fight for his life and not even being given the decency to be looked at as something approaching a threat. Youpi did not do this intentionally, of course, as he was completely focused on his task, but that really doesn't make much of a difference and actually indicates how at this point he was still unable to really look at humans as worthwhile. But life comes at you fast, and such is the rapid evolution that Youpi goes through that the very same person who did not acknowledge the fight in humans and did not kill as a result, concluded that he had to kill Morel because he had realized the astonishing things that his enemies were capable of and simply could not take the risk. He had grown an admiration for humans and their spirit, and as acknowledgement of that, he concluded that he had to kill.
どう見ても死にかけの小バエだぜ。なのに、すげえなお前ら。
And in contrast to how his students felt about Youpi's behavior towards them regarding their potential death, Morel is filled with appreciation, not having any complaints about his end if it meant dying to an opponent that showed him such respect. But when it finally comes to the ultimate moment of truth, Youpi cannot do it. He had witnessed that in comparison to him, yes, humans were weak. But despite that weakness, humans do not stop fighting to survive, to love, to live, and to protect. And that idea, how they are fighting to protect their comrades, their home, and the world they live in, I think that is something that strikes a chord with Youpi for how it reflects his ingrained duty to protect. They are nowhere near as strong as him, and yet they struggle and suffer until the very end to defend what they value. Seeing the beauty in that, Youpi does not want to snuff out such magnificent spirit. And through his refusal here, he spares the lives of those actively attempting to kill the one that he has sworn to protect. It's a huge display of experience overpowering nature, as the act of sparing them directly contradicts the duty that completely defined him, simply protecting the king. This doesn't mean that he cares for Meruem any less, and immediately after this he goes to try to find him. But in response to a show of true conviction from those Youpi fought, humanity grew from within that empty husk, and he's willing to make things quite a bit more difficult for the ants by adopting this code of honor. The very honor that Shoot and Knuckle felt that they were deprived of earlier. And so with this, I come back to a question I posed before. If Youpi is not a protector, then what is he? The answer, once he had undergone his metamorphosis, was that he is the same Youpi, and that protecting comes in many forms. He is changed, but he is the very same person, just further along in his development thanks to such life-altering experiences, not banking solely on his one duty to define his existence, and now staking value in a sort of knight's chivalrous honor system to find fulfillment in, even if he himself doesn't quite realize why exactly he feels this way. Of course, he starts to share Poof's sentiments about Komugi and regresses back once he sees what they have done to his king, and that's very natural and understandable. It's not as if his growing respect for Knuckle and the rest usurped his connection to Meruem, and seeing his king in such mortal peril no doubt snapped him back. But that very shift is a very human thing too, and I don't think it renders any of his prior evolution invalid, contributing and dovetailing with the other ideas of the arc incredibly naturally. Ideas of shifting perspectives, of experience and nurture, of appreciation and gratitude for the human experience. But while all of this progression and development is great for how it immensely deepens the character himself and those around him while showing us an arc to add to the litany of deeply human examinations in Chimera Ant, none of this is actually the most interesting idea that I grasp from Youpi. For me, Youpi is the character that most succinctly illustrates the concept of transcendent, inherent, and very abstract humanity. And I realize that sounds very pseudo-intellectual and vague, so hopefully I can clear it up. One of the most prominent elements of the Chimera Ant arc is how the ants started out as monsters, shallow and fixated on their one-dimensional goals, but due to the human genes within them, they gradually became more and more layered and complex, and more human, which led to both beauty and tragedy, two sides of the coin of the human condition, as Togashi so expertly explores. The likes of Pito, Meruem, Colt, Welfin, Ikalgo, Palm, Meleoron, and even Poof by the end of his arc, they all became much more than just one-minded foot soldiers due to a combination of their experiences and the human genes that were inherited by them through phagocytosis. However, Youpi's journey very much shows how he underwent this human evolution as well, and yet it is stated clearly that he has literally no human DNA within him. He is comprised purely of magical beasts, and he is the only notable Chimera Ant that did not descend from humans. Yet, he underwent the same process to such an extensive degree as those who did have human genes. So, what does this mean? This, more than anything, hammers home the idea that humanity is this immaterial, abstract, spiritual thing that will manifest and persevere even when it's forced down. And this is a concept that is tackled simply through human characteristics and memories manifesting in the ants in the first place, but Youpi's situation drives it home quite a bit further, because thanks to him we know that it is not purely dependent on genetics for the ants. Note that this does not mean that humanity could have sprung up in Chimera Ants before the Queen started ingesting people. There clearly has to be some sort of human essence in there. But it does mean that that essence need not be biological. It means that it could be spiritual, maybe part of the soul that is maintained, and it means that human nature transcends any material labels that anyone could put on it. That this overwhelming human sentiment will sprout anywhere as long as the spirit of humanity remains. I believe that while Youpi didn't have any biological ties to humans, his soul and spirit inherited humanity, which was more than enough to cause his progression. Meruem forgave Youpi for sparing the hunters and going against his original purpose, and while this is never confirmed by the story, I just feel that instinctually he knew that this contradictory, confusing human condition was not something to reprimand Youpi for, because he himself experienced that very same thing, even if he didn't consciously remember at the time. Because this will always happen in anything that can be called human in some capacity. Because that's just how things are.
おそらく敵の何かに負けたくなかったのだと。たとえ敵とはいえ、その場で約束を破棄にすることは敗北に感じたのです。
As I've talked about in the past with regards to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, humanity always persists. As long as it is given an opportunity, it will find its way into the most unlikely of places, and it will blossom. There is no way to stifle this, and it will lead time and time again to both ends of the spectrum: sorrow, terror, tragedy, pain, and light, love, connection, and identity. With the only thing able to move this immovable monster and shift his resolve being his own personal growth, Montutu Youpi is an example totally different, and thanks to his makeup, even more efficient in some ways, to any other character in terms of how humanity just needs to exist in the smallest possible form in the most remote possible way in the tiniest crevices of our mind and spirit to manifest and sprout. And once it takes hold, it will never let go. Such is our blessing, and such is our curse. Many thanks for watching.